What's up, guys? This is Heiss. We're here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado today to answer the question, why isn't this a cow catcher? Now, in order to answer why this is not a cow catcher, we need to go take a look at a number of different examples of what the front end of a steam locomotive looks like, because it's changed throughout history. If we're going to go through examples through history, how about we start with the one that actually is a cow catcher? Or is it? Behind me right here is Denver South Park and Pacific 191. It's a wonderful locomotive and actually the oldest steam locomotive in Colorado here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. It's in line for a little bit of a cosmetic restoration work, but we can still appreciate a few things from it, including this. This right here is 191's cow catcher. The whole time I've been saying, well, it's not a cow catcher, you've probably been wondering, then what is it? The technical term for all these things is called the pilot. This is the lead, the very front of the locomotive. This is the pilot, we have a pilot beam, and then we have a pilot truck behind it. Altogether, that makes up the front end of a steam locomotive. However, this one actually is a cow catcher, sort of. You can see how long and angled it is, differing rakes and lots of intricate woodwork that's gone into actually forming it. This type of pilot was common on these earlier locomotives, when we still ran with Lincoln pin couplers. Back in this era, locomotives were still a relatively new thing, and we were still working on expanding across all of the American West. So not everything out there really knew what a locomotive was yet. Not everything would give up the fight just that easy. So if you were to come across a cow or bison or something on the railroad that was just standing there and wouldn't move, nice and stubborn, you could nudge them out of the way with this gently contoured long device on the front, hence cow catcher. If you were to hit something at speed with this, it's made out of wood. It would probably break if it was something large like a moose or a bison or a large cow. It was not so much designed to catch the cow as to get it out of the way in an easy way. Things abruptly changed as locomotives changed. So let's go take a look at a couple more different pilots that are out there, because they're very different than this style of pilot. This one you could call a cow catcher, although it's really more of a cow nudger. So when we get a little bit more modern than the 191, being 1880 vintage, we get something like 683, 1890 vintage. 683 is a really neat locomotive. It's actually the only surviving standard gauge Rio Grande steam locomotive, which they had such a rich and diverse history of steam locomotives, and they scrapped all of them but this one, which is quite unfortunate because it leaves people not knowing all the details. Maybe one of these days we'll get into the history of the Rio Grande. We shall see. But 683 is interesting because it still has a contoured wooden beam pilot, like we saw on the 191. But in this case, it's significantly shorter. And as with 191, 683 is in need of a little TLC. Turns out the Colorado weather is absolutely hideous to locomotives and equipment, and we are all outdoors until we can get something else constructed here someday. So make sure you support your museums so that they can help take care of artifacts like these. 683 now features knuckle couplers. Talked about couplers in Couplers 101. Check out the video if you'd like. And the interesting thing with knuckles is that they really needed to be a lot shorter in order to mount to an engine like this. And as such, the pilot had to get shorter as well. We can see with 683, with the shorter pattern keeping the knuckle closer to our pilot beam, the pilot gets a lot shorter. This thing is more about deflection. You're not going to pick up and nudge cows with this. In fact, you'd probably get the pilot somewhat underneath and then you'd try to couple to them. You're not catching any cows with this. But the terminology remains for those outside of the industry. Everyone I know, every kid, everyone who watched Thomas the Tank Engine, somehow everyone heard the term cow catcher and it just fit. Since I've been in industry 10 years now, I've never once heard someone call one of these a cow catcher. It's always called the pilot. And again, we have our pilot itself, we have our pilot beam, and then we have our pilot truck. saw 1880 with 191, we saw 1890 with 683, and here's 1899, Rio Grande Southern number 20. Now 20 wouldn't have been built with a pilot that looks like this, but she got modernized to have one. And this is starting to be a lot more typical of what a lot of steam locomotives in the late 1890s, 1900s, all throughout the 20th century would have had if they weren't a big high-speed express engine, which we'll take a look at next. 20's pilot is made out of old boiler tubes. They recycle everything they have on the railroad if they can. So when they're no longer good for the pressure vessel, they cut them out and make things out of them. We've got a piece of angle iron all the way around the bottom, extra bracing on the inside, and as well, a lot of connections on the backside that are actually heavily cast members into the frame to tie everything in to our pilot beam. And you can see on 20 that 20 absolutely used hers several times over. You can see how many big dents and bangs and how bent it is. 20 served a rather hard life on the Rio Grande Southern Railroad and got into a lot of shenanigans, as it were. Now, I will have to brag for my friends here. I didn't help with the restoration of the 20, but they did. They did everything in beautiful detail to make her accurate to her 1940s appearance. One of those boiler tubes is new. Can you tell which one it is? No, you can't. That's right. The guys that did the restoration on 20 wanted her to be period accurate, so much so that they put a brand new boiler tube in and dented the heck out of it to make it look and match the rest of them. That guy right there.
I didn't do it.
You didn't do it? Who did it?
Dusty did it.
Oh, Dusty did it?
I helped out.
Oh, okay. The world famous Jeff Taylor. I was just bragging about your restoration for my video.
Oh, it's funny how often we get asked, like, when are you going to fix the pilot? And I say, we did. They go, where? And I said, well, you wouldn't know it, but yeah, we replaced the section and damaged it to match just as it was. And Dusty did the work to beat it to death, and then he kept the original as a memento.
Well, there you go. That's the joys of being in a museum, actually getting to put things back to match photographs to insane detail. And maybe someday we'll bug Jeff to do a whole video about the 20 and explain all the shenanigans he went into.
Maybe.
Maybe. And so now back to our intro locomotive, the Denver and Rio Grande Western number 491. 491's pilot is a very similar style to 20's. You can see, still boiler tube construction. We've got the angle iron and the bracing on the backside, with the addition of additional rock guards that go on the front. And you can see that 491, even having a relatively easy and short service life compared to 20, still has met her fair share of obstacles in the day. But again, 491's pilot, very steep. You're not going to be scooping up any cows with this thing. Now, how about we go take a look at that big express engine I was talking about, shall we? Now, on a large locomotive like CB&Q 5629, the biggest and heaviest steam locomotive we have here at the Colorado Railroad Museum, the pilot looks nothing like that cowcatcher we saw at the beginning of the video. The pilot is huge. It's absolutely covered and sheathed, designed to look a little bit streamlined, because CB&Q 5629 was used for fast passenger service. It bears very little resemblance to that wedge-shaped cow nudger that we saw. Take a look at it from the side. Look at how vertical it is. This is not designed to ramp up and catch anything. It's designed to hit things and shift them off to the side. And in fact, you can see places where it's been patched before, and as well places it's been dented. You can see that this thing definitely got used. If you're running 100 miles an hour pulling a fast passenger train and something's on the track, you're not exactly gonna stop just on a dime. And like those other pilots we saw on the other locomotives, we have a big pilot beam right here, this time made out of steel, and behind it, we have all of the critical engine components and suspension and truck components that help keep the train on the tracks. The whole point of these pilots is to make sure that nothing gets underneath the wheels, nothing that would be big, heavy, solid enough to derail the train can get there or damage our cylinders. So this is the biggest, most expensive, and complicated part to make on a steam locomotive. Other than the jacketing and the covers, that's all one giant piece cast. one piece. That's complicated. There's very few places that still want to do castings of that style. So if you didn't find a way to protect it, whether it was by a cowcatcher or a pilot, you were going to be out some serious cash. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this look into cowcatchers and why we still refer to almost all of them as cowcatchers outside of the railway industry. But if you're in the industry, they're a pilot. So, hopefully you learned something new and hopefully you liked the video. Thanks so much for watching.